Let me start this lecture with a quote. A quote from Nathaniel Branden, who says that, apart from disturbance, whose roots are biological, I cannot think of a single psychological problem, from anxiety and depression to underachievement at school or at work, to fear of intimacy, happiness or success, to alcohol or drug abuse, to spouse battering or child molestation, to codependency and sexual disorders, to passivity and chronic aimlessness, to suicide and crimes of violence, that is not traceable, at least in part, to the problem of deficient self-esteem. Of all the judgments we pass in our life, none is as important as the one we pass on ourselves. The person who said this was Nathaniel Branden, often called the father of the self-esteem movement, and probably the first to promote a holistic understanding of self-esteem. And the definition of self-esteem that he provides is self-esteem as an integrated sum of self-confidence and self-respect. It is the conviction that one is competent to live and worthy of living. The first part of self-esteem is self-confidence. This is a feeling of competence, a feeling that we are able to face the challenges of life. And the second component is self-respect. Self-respect means we like ourselves. We feel worthy of happiness. Or yet another way to say it is feeling competent means trusting in our own abilities, to think on our own, to make our own decisions, to learn and to cope with life. Not seeing ourselves as a victim of circumstances or the victim of the action of others. Feeling worthy means being comfortable in asserting one's thoughts, wants and needs in an appropriate manner. And the feeling that being happy and fulfilled are something that's appropriate to us. So on the other hand, if you have low self-esteem, then you feel inappropriate to life, somehow wrong as a person. People with high levels of self-esteem are more resilient. That means they bounce back more easily if they face troubles, if something bad happens to them. Also, their romantic relationships and also their relationships to their family and friends are more fulfilled because they are able to express themselves more openly. Also, people are more successful because they have high self-esteem. Beliefs are self-fulfilling prophecies. We talked about this in an earlier lecture, and it is true here as well. If I believe that I am worthy and competent, if I believe in myself, then I'm much more likely to succeed. And last but not least, people with high self-esteem are also happier. But let me now address some of the common misconceptions about self-esteem. Self-esteem, first of all, is a fundamental human need. Self-esteem affects every area in our life. When we are alone, when we are with others, whether we are at home or at work, we are constantly evaluating ourselves. Researchers call self-esteem the immune system of consciousness. Researchers call self-esteem the immune system of consciousness. A healthy immune system doesn't guarantee that you'll never become ill, but it does reduce your susceptibility to illness, and it can help you recover faster if you do get sick. The same is true psychologically. People with strong self-esteem are more resilient in face of life's difficulties. It is impossible to have too much self-esteem. People who are arrogant actually show a lack of self-esteem. Those who are truly comfortable with themselves and their achievements take pleasure in being who they are. They don't need to tell the world about it. Secondly, it's not about being perfect. Perfection is an ideal no one can consistently hold up to. And failure is an important part of learning. Remember the growth mindset? We have to be willing to fail. We have to be willing to make mistakes in order to be the best we can. Tal Ben-Shahar, the professor teaching positive psychology at Harvard University, calls this giving yourself the permission to be human. because humans do fail. So we have to give ourselves the permission to do so and not be perfect. Thirdly, self-esteem is about what you think of yourself. Becoming successful, powerful, or well-liked does not automatically translate into good self-esteem. In fact, talented and powerful people who doubt their own core values are usually unable to find joy in their achievements. So keep in mind, self-esteem has only to do with what I think of myself, not what anybody else thinks of me. And lastly, self-esteem has to be grounded in reality. Just like optimism must be grounded in reality, self-esteem must be too. In fact, Nathaniel Branden says, self-esteem is the reputation we acquire with ourselves. And we build up this reputation with our actions. And in the following part of the class, we'll explore which actions to take to build up our self-esteem. Many research findings suggest that the results of self-esteem enhancement programs are very weak. Much of the evidence points to the fact that many claims are extravagant and unfounded, especially in popular culture. But why are all these self-esteem programs so ineffective? The main reason is that what determines your level of self-esteem is what you do. Of course, it's nice to read and hear inspiring words and get an intellectual understanding of something. But it's what we do that leads to our self-esteem, not what we hear or know. Also, when we talked about change, we talked about the importance of building habits, and that this is the most effective approach to change. And once we introduce behavioral change, our new behavior in turn changes our attitudes. You remember self-perception theory. If you want to improve in a specific area of life, the most effective way is to change your behavior, because we learn about ourselves by observing our behavior. In order to understand how exactly we can do that, we will take a look at the framework that Nathaniel Branden sets up. He talks about the 6 pillars that make up self-esteem, 6 practices that are important for the cultivation of self-esteem. Here they are. The first of those practices, or pillars, is called living consciously. Living consciously, in essence, means being mindful. It's what we just talked about before. Living consciously is living in a mindful manner and paying attention to what we think and what we do. The second of those pillars is self-acceptance. I also mentioned this before. Self-accepting is about being willing to experience whatever we truly think, feel and do, even if we don't like it. Facing our mistakes and learning from them, and giving ourselves the permission to be human. Self-responsibility is the third pillar of self-esteem. It's an active orientation to life, rather than a passive, victim-like orientation. Being self-responsibly means that we understand that we are responsible for our choices and our actions at every level, and that the achievement of our goals, happiness and values is also within our responsibility. Here's an example. In personal relationships, people who are most fulfilled go beyond just saying, I want this and that. They ask, what am I willing to do to get what I want? They pay attention to the quality of the time they spend with their friends and family, children and spouses. They notice whether or not communication is clear, and they acknowledge their own feelings, are sensitive to the feelings of others, and face conflicts and deal with them. Viktor Frankl, a Jewish psychologist who survived the Holocaust, said this. He said that ultimately, man should not ask what the meaning of his life is, but rather must recognize that it is he who is asked. In a word, each man is questioned by life, and he can only answer to life by answering for his own life. To life, he can only respond by being responsible. Another example for acting self-responsibly would be in business. People who succeed don't limit themselves to doing only the tasks to which they are assigned. They're constantly looking for ways to contribute outside their current job descriptions. The fourth of the pillars is self-assertiveness. And this simply means to be able to say no when it's appropriate and to say yes when this is appropriate. Self-assertiveness is about standing up for what we believe in. Living purposefully means to have clear goals, to have a purpose in what we are doing. We also talked about purpose in the Change lecture, and I refer you to the legacy exercise. Maybe revisit it to really get an understanding of what's my purpose in life, what am I here for, why am I doing the things that I'm doing. And last but not least, integrity. That's the sixth pillar of self-esteem. Integrity means that there is a match between what we say and what we do. It also means that our behavior matches our beliefs and our convictions. When we show integrity, we act in congruence with what we believe is right. Here's an example. You commit and write down to work out twice a week. And then you go and actually start working out twice a week because you committed to it. This is integrity. When I keep my word and follow up on what I say, that's when I communicate to myself, my words matter, I matter. On the other hand, when I communicate something, commit to doing something, and don't follow up on what I said, then I'm essentially saying to myself, what I say is not important. It doesn't matter. I do not matter. On the other hand, when I keep my word and I follow up on what I say, that's when I communicate to myself, my words matter. I matter. The principal exercise to build self-esteem, it is also developed by Nathaniel Branden, is what is called sentence stems completion exercise. The exercise consists of sentence stems, such as, if I live more self-assertively today, ... and requires us to create 5 to 10 endings to this sentence. This simple exercise rests on the insight that we all have more knowledge than what is consciously available to us. It's a tool to access and activate those hidden inner resources. And this in turn helps us change our behavior. You will find a detailed outline in the additional resources. Here's the quick roundup of this lecture. Self-esteem is a deep conviction that we have a right to be happy and that we are competent in thinking, learning, and making appropriate decisions. It has to be grounded in reality and doesn't rely on comparison to others. It simply is the joy in one's own being. Once upon a time, there was a rabbit who went to animal school. He did great at running and great at jumping, but climbing wasn't that good. Flying wasn't even a possibility, and swimming not only terrified and nearly drowned him, but it humiliated him in front of all the other animals. So he went home, hoping his parents would understand and help. But they said he had to get a diploma. So the next day he went to talk to the guidance counselor. The counselor diagnosed that he didn't like school because he wasn't doing well in swimming. And so she arranged for him not to go to running anymore. After all, he was doing fine there. Instead, he had to take 2 periods of swimming. This short story illustrates a point. We are too focused on weaknesses. Time and energy spent trying to improve our weaknesses could far more productively be focused on maximizing a strength. We should just manage weaknesses, not try to overcome them, because it is our strengths through which we can best contribute to the world, and that will bring us our greatest satisfaction. So one of the most important contributions of positive psychology is a focus on our strengths. Peter Drucker, one of the most famous managers and leaders of the 20th century, said a person can perform only from strength. One cannot build performance on weakness, let alone something one cannot do at all. The strengths approach focuses on what is right, on what is working, and on what is strong. Strengths are part of our basic human nature. Everybody has strengths. Our areas of greatest potential are the areas of our greatest strengths. Fixing weaknesses alone is not enough. We also have to cultivate our strengths. And last but not least, using a strength is the smallest thing we can do to make the biggest difference. When we are using our strengths, we are more authentic and energized. We have higher levels of well-being and fulfillment, and we are more likely to achieve our goals and deliver better performance. Unfortunately, as the short story at the beginning illustrated, our usual focus lies on our weaknesses and not on our strengths. In the workplace, for example, the usual practice is to look at your weaknesses and find ways to work on them. Just remember again, our inherent negativity bias makes us focus on the things that are wrong, and we tend to miss out on what is actually good and working. Whether we focus on strengths or on weaknesses, one point that we already mentioned before comes true again. What we focus on determines how we see the world. We can decide to look at what is not working, that will be the fault finder, or we can choose to look at what's working and try to see things as a benefit finder. Let's take a time out here and do some benefit finding with yourself. What are your strengths? A simple question, but it is one that we often find surprisingly difficult to answer. It often seems much easier to find our weaknesses. Stop the video here for a minute and just write down what you think are your strengths. In the resources, you can find some more strategies to discover your strengths. You have various options, and there are 3 major frameworks out there that help you discover them more systematically. For now, here in the video, we will focus on character strengths. We do this because it's the only framework that's freely available, and you can take it without any problems, and it's completely free. Psychiatrists and clinical psychologists share a common Bible. It is called the DSM, Diagnostic and Statistical Manual for Mental Illnesses. It's a great big book that provides a vocabulary for everybody who's working on mental illnesses. It provides a classification of all the things that can go wrong with people. All the symptoms of schizophrenia, personality disorders, or psychopaths are all described in detail and allows everybody who's working with them professionally to measure what is wrong with a person. But nothing similar to that existed for the positive side of human beings. That is why Chris Peterson and Marty Seligman, 2 of the founding fathers of positive psychology, have come up with what they called Inventory of Strengths. It is the best known strengths framework in positive psychology and tries to compile the wisdom of thousands of years of spiritual and philosophical traditions. The 2 psychologists went out and studied all the classic wisdom texts, philosophers and religious traditions like the Bible, the Bushido Samurai Code, the Bhagavad Gita, and so on and so on. The result was a framework made up of 24 universal character strengths, such as love, courage, and humility. Let's take a closer look. What they learned was that they all shared 6 common virtues: wisdom, courage, love or humanity, temperance, justice, and spirituality or transcendence. What they said is that if we want to be happy, we have to figure out how to put these 6 virtues into actions. And the way we put them into action is by applying our character strengths. The virtue of wisdom can be achieved through these 5 character strengths: love of learning, perspective, curiosity, open-mindedness, and creativity. In order to find out what your character strengths are, you can take the basic online assessment for free and find out more about your top strengths, which are also called your signature strengths. These are those strengths that are most core to who we are as human beings. They are very easy and natural to us to express, and also our friends and family will be able to see them in us. A quick side note here: if you want to take a look at another strengths framework, check out the Realize 2 or the Strengths Finder 2.0. Those 2 frameworks are different. They are different in how they approach our strengths, and they are also different in how they see strengths. But they can be definitely very helpful too. There are links and related exercises in the resources. Once you've completed the VIA survey, and maybe done some of the exercises you find in the additional resources, you will have a clearer picture of your strengths. Maybe it will also be easier for you to spot them in others. But knowing your strengths is only one part of the story. It only gets really exciting when you start applying them more often. Because in the end, strengths are only strengths when they can be effectively applied. A strength without application in the right situation is nothing more than untapped potential. So when it comes to how can we apply our strengths, this is very specific to you individually. Even though I added resources with lots of suggestions, if you want to get most out of your strengths, you have to be creative. So after you identified your top strengths, choose one of them, and for the following week, use the strength in a new way every day. Again, be creative about it. This exercise, if done regularly, has been shown to have a long-term positive effect on your well-being. And the beauty of applying our strengths is that they not only affect our happiness, but also our success. Still, there are a few things to keep in mind. First, apply them. That's easy. Practical wisdom can only be reached through practice. There's no substitute for exercising our strengths in the right way and understanding why. More controversial is that our strengths are not fixed from birth. They can be developed. Remember here to keep a growth mindset. And thirdly, working on our weaknesses is not irrelevant. Do not forget about them. I'm not advocating ignoring your weaknesses completely. It is just that we have to shift more focus towards strengths, because that's where our biggest potential lies. And here we already are at the roundup of this lecture. Strengths enable us to be at our best. We need more focus on what we are good at.